So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter Holland. I'm the Associate Dean for the Arts, and it's my job to introduce Saturday Scholars. It's a job, it's a pleasure. Now, of course, Notre Dame is a university of traditions, but there's one tradition which I think is now only 2-3 years old, but which looks set to last a very long time. As you walk onto campus on game day, if you come the way we do up Notre Dame Avenue, you'll see in the parking lot just by the Hesburgh Center that there's a green 1934 fire truck. And the fire truck, which happens to have a rather good tailgate attached to it, is partly the property of our speaker today, Robert Sedlack. I gather it did actually make it down to Florida for the we won't talk about it, but a certain game last year. Not being driven all that way, but it was it made it on a flatbed all the way down there. Robert Sedlack is associate professor in our program of design. Indeed, Robert really is graphic design at Notre Dame. The fact that this is one of the most flourishing of our programs, that has grown and grown and grown in student numbers so much over the last few years, is really down to Robert and, in terms of industrial design, to Paul Down. The two of them have taken us to a completely different level of achievement, and our students have responded to it. Now that both programs are ensconced in their new quarters at Westlake, and no longer working out of decidedly unsafe and unsavory conditions in the previous building, we look forward to it flourishing even more. Robert has been at Notre Dame for quite some time. I won't embarrass him by saying how long, but he teaches an enormous range of courses on a wide range of topics. The ones that he jotted down for me included discrimination, gun control, and voter participation. And if you're wondering, well, what has that got to do with graphic design? Robert will probably tell you in a moment. He's interested in the way that the world is changed when design is applied appropriately and collaboratively with organizations that are dedicated to social betterment. Design, in other words, is very much at Notre Dame part of the mission of the university in terms of social justice and Catholic social teaching. So let me welcome Robert Sedlack, who's going to talk about his project on design in South Africa.
This is my daughter, Emma. She's my tech. She knows much more about technology than I do. Thank you, Emma. All right, thank you, Peter, for the introduction. I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate everyone tearing themselves away from the wonderful tailgates out there to spend a little time here with us in the Snite Museum. As Peter mentioned, I'm a faculty in the design program here, and I teach a class called Visual Communication Design 8, Design for Social Good, Affecting Positive Change. This class was formerly known as Graphic Design 3, and this is the course description. This advanced course in visual communication illustrates how design can make a demonstrable difference by informing and educating the public. Class projects focus on design's ability to affect positive social change. To my mind, this makes perfect sense for the University of Notre Dame. In the mission of the University of Notre Dame, the university seeks to cultivate a disciplined sensibility to poverty, injustice, and oppression that burden the lives of so many. So the projects that Peter mentioned, and there were many more beyond that, get after it, kind of addressing these issues. So the challenge in 2011 for the senior class, and there were some juniors in that class as well, was the challenge of xenophobia. And I will admit I didn't know a lot about xenophobia. Xenophobia is the intense or irrational dislike or fear of people from other countries. It all started when I got an email from a gentleman named Paul Horn. Paul Horn is a Notre Dame alum. He had worked at the CSC, and he had moved to Johannesburg to take a job at the Dominican convent school. And this is the email that, this is part of the email that Paul sent to me and a few other people, 3 other people. And he was asking if we four rather, would be interested in getting involved in a project to fight xenophobia, an anti-xenophobia campaign. You can see that, I think, in the second paragraph there. Again, didn't know much about South Africa, didn't know much about xenophobia. As I began to look into South Africa, and that email, by the way, was in April of 2011, I learned a lot. One of the things I learned, and I will read this so I can get it right, according to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in 2011, the year we started this project, almost 500,000 people had claimed status as asylum seekers or refugees in South Africa. Many come from Somalia, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Ethiopia, fleeing persecution, political unrest, and war. So Johannesburg, the capital, well, they kind of have multiple capital cities, but Johannesburg is one of the capital cities. And what I came to understand about Johannesburg, and I had done some work in Haiti when I first got to Notre Dame, what I came to understand about Johannesburg is that there is great poverty there, incredible poverty, but there's also great wealth in Johannesburg. So many people from war-torn countries, other countries in Africa, were fleeing because there was opportunity in Johannesburg and in South Africa. This is a picture of downtown South Africa. One of the things that was just astounding to me during one of the visits with students that I took down there, we were doing interviews in some homes. And when I say homes, I'm talking about a house that has multiple rooms, and there would be a family that lives in each room. Sometimes as many as 8 or 9 people would live in one room. At one point, we were interviewing some people, and we were going to go out to dinner afterwards. So the image on the left is the place where we were interviewing people. The image on the right was the mall that was just a few miles away. So that kind of illustrates the discrepancy between the very wealthy and the very poor. And again, these were only a few miles away from one another. And I've been to the Mall of America and some other pretty nice malls, but this is probably the nicest mall I've ever been to. I also didn't know much about xenophobia, so I started kind of educating myself on this. Initially, my thought was it must be kind of crossing socioeconomic borders, wealthy people doing bad things to poor people, or poor people doing bad things to wealthy people. But what I came to find out very quickly, and in discussions with Paul Horn as well, is that it was the kind of the poorest of the poor in South Africa doing horrible things to the poorest of the poor from other countries who were moving in. There was certainly some of the people who were moving in from other countries were taking jobs that may have gone to a South African, but that was a little bit more perception than reality. There was truth there to that, but it wasn't as bad as people thought it was. I also heard the story of this woman. Her name is Mary Kasembe. And in 2008, there were, and I'll show a little video in a few minutes, there were some just atrocious xenophobic attacks where people were killed. Mary lived with her family in a house in a neighborhood, and they are not from South Africa. One night, the neighbors who they had lived among for years and years and years decided they did not want the Kasembe family living in their neighborhood anymore, and they chased them out. They were literally running for their lives, and actually Mary and her family actually ran and sought refuge at the Dominican convent school where Paul Horn worked, and this is a picture of her family. Pretty atrocious stories. At that point, Mary was in her late teens, and she was studying to become a teacher, getting a certificate for teaching. And this is the kind of thing that happens. This, by the way, is the one room that the 9 people live in now. This is Mary now, who is a teacher. 2 years after that attack, after she fled for her life with her family, she was teaching in a classroom, and there's a child that came into the classroom that was wearing the clothes that belonged to one of her younger siblings that were stolen the night that they were chased out of their home. So we heard, I can't tell you how many stories like that we heard, just things that you can't even wrap your mind around, things that almost impossible at least to wrap your mind around. I want to show you a video that will kind of set this up a little bit. This is from, let's see here. Oops. This is from the New York Times. And let's hope it doesn't play a commercial first.
This is Barry Barak reporting from Deep Sloot, South Africa. Furaiku Jirachita was 26 years old when he was murdered by a mob next to a garbage-filled ditch in a squatter camp. His brothers Clements and Washington were left to mourn him in an outdoor church. Mob violence is not uncommon in this sprawling informal settlement in northern Johannesburg. In fact, that same January day, another man was murdered by a different mob. The night before Farai's death, a gang of thugs, thought to be Zimbabweans, marauded through the shanties. The next morning, a mob formed, bent on catching the criminals and exacting revenge. They burned shacks that supposedly belonged to the criminals and found Farai nearby. His killing was based on mistaken assumptions and the fact that he was Zimbabwean.
Then Farai comes down along from squatter camp from number 1. He was used to go and bath. When he comes there, he see a fire which was burning, and we want to see what was happening.
He came there, so the mob started beating him with stones and everything.
He kicked here. He fell again in the water.
Took him out of there, put him on the ground again.
And there's another, this guy, taking a plank, hit him more than 200 times. Simple to kill a person. They are not scared to kill you.
150,000 people live in Deep Sloot, but there is very little police presence. Many of those living here feel the need to police themselves, and often the actions of vigilantes are affected by their prejudices. Deep Sloot has a large population of Zimbabwean immigrants. They have come to escape their own country's economic meltdown. They are frequently blamed for crime.
For better condition, all of us working here, we run this side because there's no way to see by this situation.
Even me, it's about money, it's about working. I don't like to be here in South Africa.
South Africa, the wealthiest country on the continent, has a natural lure for the poor in neighboring nations. These immigrants are often resented by impoverished South Africans who say the foreigners accept jobs at very low wages. The largest immigrant population comes from Zimbabwe. It's estimated that more than a tenth of that country's people now live in South Africa. 3 suspects, including 2 teenagers, have been arrested and charged with murdering Farai. But the police have not yet caught the people responsible for delivering the deadliest blows, although they have a video of the killing recorded with a cell phone. During the week after the murder, community members attended a large meeting with a cabinet official from the provincial government. She was jeered for speaking out against mob justice.
Mob justice. Ayisoze yanakha ngalutho. Uma ngabe ubulala umuntu, liko bhibhilini batsho, akirelate amakereke. The 10 commandments di ring. The 10 commandments di ring.
The criminals, they are above the law. The foreigners, they are above the law. And most of the criminals are deep slow, the foreigners. Then it's a criminal rebate, let's say rebate, my police are rescue. What's a wish of photo? How will I call the hand fingerprint back with Lisa prepaid? So, here Nanga Tamasagore, Bagash release even eye for an eye.
But what if the wrong eye is taken? Friends from Farai's church collected money to help pay the expenses for Farai's burial.
They just kill him for nothing.
So I show that, I think that does a pretty good job setting up the project. So from that first email, I signed on with Paul. I said, I'm in. And by the way, that happened in June of 2011, so that was 2 months after Paul's email came to me. The other person who signed on was a woman named Andrea Pellegrino, who was starting her own collaborative firm. Andrea is also a Notre Dame alum, and she had worked at a place called World Studio in New York before she started her own firm. World Studio, as you can see, is a firm that builds bridges between our clients and communities to enable positive social change. And her new firm, Pellegrino Collaborative, she wanted to do the same thing. In fact, a bit of coincidence, I had both Andrea, who is here in the black, and her partner, Mark Randall, come the year before this to run one of their implementing social change workshops with our students, and it was quite fabulous. So Andrea and I also both decided that we were interested and wanted to be involved in this. The other person who was critical to this was Sister Natalie, who is shown here at the Cosi Neighborhood Foundation. She was an 80-plus-year-old nun who was one of the most vibrant people I've ever met in my life. She was astoundingly spectacular. Unfortunately, Sister Natalie died just a few months ago, but we needed her to be on board with all these projects, and she was. It became very apparent to me that I would need help with this. I needed knowledge bases that were already on this campus, and I reached out to colleagues at the Center for Social Concerns, the Kellogg Institute, and of course the ACE program here at Notre Dame, because I knew I needed help. Couldn't do this by myself, and the students couldn't do it by themselves either. I will also tell you that in my time before coming back to Notre Dame, Peter is right, this is my 16th year at Notre Dame, I actually worked in a design firm in downtown Chicago. And in that firm, I had a lot of opportunities to work on these similar kinds of projects. I worked on an AIDS book when the Museum of Science and Industry was the first museum that had an extraordinary exhibit about HIV/AIDS. I also got to work on Identity for the Enterprising Kitchen, which was an organization on the north side of Chicago, started by two women who literally took homeless women off the streets and gave them job skills and helped them build a resume and helped them on to the next stage of their career. When I first came to Notre Dame, I mentioned Haiti earlier. I actually was engaged with the Haiti program, Father Tom Snite and Sarah Craig, who then worked at the Haiti program and worked on this project called Bon Sel, which means good salt. And what good salt is about is helping stop the spread of lymphatic filariasis. Lymphatic filariasis is the disease that manifests itself as elephantitis, so the enlarged limbs. So those kinds of projects were always things that I personally have been interested in, and then was able to start working with students, and actually students worked on the Bon Sel project as well. The other thing we do as a program is we bring in speakers who do this kind of work. In the last year and a half, John Bielenberg, actually I guess 2 years now, John Bielenberg from Project M has been here twice, and he hosted a week-long, over fall break, a week-long blitz in South Bend, and actually there are some students in the audience tonight that were involved in that. Project M and John Bielenberg are about driving positive social change. Another person we had just last fall is Emily Pillaton. Same kind of thing. She works more in the world of industrial or product design, but we're sharing these kinds of people and this kind of thinking with our students. Whoops. So the first day of class, fall 2011, this senior level class, again, there are some juniors in the class as well, I hand them this project outline that's about xenophobia, and I recognize that you can't read it, and that's okay. In addition to giving them this outline, I also share the story of Mary Kasembe and what happened to her when she was chased out of her home with her family, and how she, saw the little kid in her classroom 2 years later who's wearing her siblings' clothes. I showed them the Barry Barrack video that you just saw, and we also had a Skype with Paul Horn. Paul was very serious about laying out this project for the students, and I was sitting with the students looking at the screen, and I have a distinct memory of that moment when I stood up and turned off the Skype and turned to the students. To a person, all of them looked like this. And I could tell they were thinking, how the hell are we going to do anything about xenophobia in South Africa from South Bend, Indiana? And there was a part of me thinking, I don't know how they're going to do this. But I will tell you, at this university, we had extraordinary students, all of whom have done some kind of social work in their high school years or before. Smart, motivated students, and I trusted that some good would come from this. I've sprinkled some quotes throughout. Brandon is here today, but this was from the first day. I remember thinking that xenophobia was such a monumental issue, but it made me excited about the project. So then the research phase began. I had no idea what they were going to design. I had no idea. It took me a while to get there, but I'm comfortable doing that now with the students because they always come up with something that's appropriate and effective. At this point, I wasn't thinking about taking students necessarily to Johannesburg, to South Africa. So I reached out on our campus to different people who had some kind of history with that country. These three people, Patrick McCormick, Caitlin Lentz, and Graham Thomas, from left to right, had spent the summer in South Africa on a CSC grant, so they knew it well. They all came to the class, and in fact, Patrick came to the class many times and was a very kind of influential person because of his knowledge and the stories that these three students shared with the students in my design class. Other people, my biggest takeaway was hearing from fellow students about how helpless they began feeling when they were conversing with public officials. So the discrimination that was happening in South Africa was at almost every level. I also brought these three people to class. Left to right, it's Professor Carolyn Nordstrom, a Notre Dame professor and fellow at Notre Dame's Kellogg Institute for International Studies. Her areas of expertise are warfare, anthropology of war and peace, epicenters of conflict and peace building, transnational crime, and globalization. In the middle is Patience Kabamba, a native of the Democratic Republic of Congo, who was a visiting fellow in the Hesburgh Center for Peace Studies. And on the right is Jude Norum from the Kroc Institute for International Studies. So these people, including the students, could really give us some insight and really help us out. It wasn't like being there, but boy, it made a big difference for the students. It was one thing to read about what was happening on the ground in Johannesburg, but another to actually have someone tell you what they witnessed firsthand. At this point, I realized it would probably help if someone got down there. So Andrea Pellegrino and I figured out a way to get down there over fall break in 2011. And we visited Paul Horn. Paul, and stayed with him actually. Paul put together, I was only there for 4 days, which is tough for a 16-hour plane ride. But he put together a very good schedule for us. We went on neighborhood visits. We got to meet with 3rd graders, 6th graders, and 11th graders. We met with people at the Cozy Neighborhood Foundation. It was a pretty packed schedule, but the learning we did during that trip was extraordinary. And at that point of the project, I began to think very seriously about getting the students down there and how we could do that. Got to meet the Kasembe family, did the neighborhood visits, and really get a sense for the environment. A lot of in-home interviews. Met with students, as I said. And this is a quote, we really took off on the campaign after you go back from your fall break trip. We felt more connected and aware of the issue, having experienced it vicariously through you. As soon as I saw those children in the videos, I knew we had to do everything in our power to help those kids some way, somehow. And when I started hearing things like this is also when I thought, how are we going to get the students down there? So we're after midway through the semester at this point, and I realized that the faux structure of a semester is not going to be long enough for this project. I am fortunate that my colleague Ann Barry, who teaches the next class, it's called Professional Practice, she has an open assignment in that class. So most of the students chose to take that next class. There are 4 assignments in that class. One of them is open. And have their open assignment be to continue on with this project. In addition to moving that forward, we were able to get funding to take students to South Africa over that spring break. And I will tell you, I couldn't have been more impressed with the students who decided to do this. Not everyone could do it, because you know what seniors are doing over spring break? I mean, they're doing stuff like that, right? I mean, that's what most seniors are doing over spring break. They're not going to South Africa to try and stop xenophobia. So the whole idea was to get down there and field test these ideas that the students had come up with in the fall semester. We had a really intense schedule. And for students that were used to staying up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, whether they went to Club Fever or not, most nights they were going to bed at like 10 and 11 o'clock at night because they were exhausted. We had an aggressive schedule, to say the least. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, it's a little off. But on Tuesday, March 13th, depart for Pretoria to visit Office of Home Affairs at 3 a.m. You never want to get students up at 3 a.m., I'll tell you that. And I'll come back to that Pretoria story in a moment. Before we left, the students printed 260 T-shirts with the Together Plus, which is what they named the organization and the project. And they shared these with teachers and students when we got down there. So both trips I've taken with students, the first thing we did was go to Apartheid Museum, which gives wonderful kind of historical context over the last 20 years in South Africa. So that was the first trip. And this was the first group that went down with me. There's one person missing because he had a mock trial, so he joined us later. I think what's so different about our project is that we are guiding and helping our audience to develop solutions to xenophobia themselves. That, I think, is a really important quote and a really important understanding by this student. By actually going to South Africa, I got not only to experience the xenophobic situations and social tension in a very close and detailed way, but I also was able to relate the stories of each family I visited to my life and really personalize it. So getting the students down there, and this came out of my own visit in the fall, getting the students down there was critical to this project, that immersion. We visited Mary Kasembe and her family. That's their one-room home. We visited a lot of homes and did a lot of interviews, shared the work that the students had done to date. I went on neighborhood visits as well. This is a guy that collects scrap metal. Visited a fair amount of shanty towns and interviewed people who lived in these towns. So Pretoria specifically invigorated my sense of empathy and left me absolutely at a loss for words, which you know for me is extremely rare. That's true of this student. To this day, I can still feel that heartbreak that I felt when I realized Mary and her siblings were subject to such disgrace. So we did leave for Pretoria at 3 in the morning, and Pretoria is where the Office of Home Affairs is. And that's where refugees legally in the country have to go and get their papers re-upped, basically. And we had heard really bad things about it, and we wanted to see it for ourselves. It was about an hour away. We got there about 4 o'clock in the morning before sunrise, and there were already hundreds of people in line. The way they do this is they put them in line by country of origin and by gender. And we also heard that they just kind of randomly let people in. That didn't make any sense. At one point, actually, we saw a car come up, and these very well-dressed African men, I can't remember their country, got out of the car and went right in. And I remember a couple of us went over and said, why did that happen? And the response was, oh, they obviously paid someone off. So the corruption in this situation was extreme. You can see the men standing back to front so no one can cut in line. And there were hundreds of people when we showed up, and by the time 8 o'clock rolled around, there were thousands, some of whom had been there for days. The other thing I want to mention about the students is they were fearless. I couldn't have been more impressed. I mean, they were not afraid to walk up and just say, hey, my name is so-and-so, and we're working on this project. Can you tell us about this? I mean, the information we drew from this one session was phenomenal. That's Paul Horn in the black shirt. This woman, do you guys remember how long she'd been there? It was like a week or something, right? Yeah, this woman had been there with an infant child for a week. She was in the front of the line. That guy tried to cut in line. It did not turn out well for him. And yes, that guy from the Office of Home Affairs has a whip in his hand. Traveling to Johannesburg over spring break was a fantastic experience. We were able to actually ask questions that we had been throwing around for months to people who could give us real answers. Our group had identified all these issues we thought we could address through Together Plus, and we were able to see if we were really addressing these problems appropriately. So the proposed solutions that the students came up with, there were 4 of them. One was a community mural project, one was a healthcare rights campaign, one was a children's book, and one was a Welcome to South Africa guide. One of the things that happened in 2008 with all the xenophobic attacks is there's a lot of really xenophobic graffiti that went up all over Johannesburg. So the Community Mural Project became a project to get a community together and cover up that hateful language. This is a wall actually directly across the street from, or very near, both the Dominican Convent School and I guess directly across the street from Cozy Neighborhood Foundation. While we were there, we actually started this project, and we actually were supposed to finish it with a big community event the last day we were there. Unfortunately, it rained the last day we were there, so we couldn't pull it off. But we heard that the event happened afterwards, and about 200 people from the local community came out and were involved in this project. There's the group. This is long, but it's worth it. Being that we were geographically disconnected from the project, going to Johannesburg was as important as anything we did for the project. The trip helped us put faces and stories to the problems that we were hearing about, which more than anything created an emotional connection between the students and the project. Now we were not working for a professor or Paul, they kind of were still working for me a little bit, but for specific people that we knew were impacted by xenophobia. Getting to know them on a personal level made my project have meaning. We wanted to do a great job with the project so they could have a positive impact on their lives. Here's a class with the Together Plus t-shirts on and the teachers. This is the Healthcare Rights Project, and being in Johannesburg, there are I think 13 different languages that are spoken fairly widely in Johannesburg. So one of the way that discrimination happens in the world of healthcare is if someone doesn't speak English. English is widely spoken in Johannesburg, but if someone doesn't speak English, that's a way that people discriminate. So here are some posters in multiple languages. And then getting to share these with people, showing these to people. This is a woman we visited in her home, and we showed her, we had just this little mock-up, and we handed it to her, and she could read and speak English, and she would read a sentence, and she would read the sentence, she would look up at us, and she would say, "Is this true?" And we would say, "Yes, it's true." And she'd read the next sentence, and she would say, "Is this true?" She had no idea what her rights were in the world of healthcare. There's an interesting moment when she asked if she could keep that little, FedEx printed mock-up, and we said, of course. And she was leading us out of the one room that she and her family lived in, and she slid that little piece in between the cushions of her couch. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Why would she do that? And so I kind of lingered for a moment, and I kind of pulled that back, and that's where she kept all her most important papers in between the two cushions of the couch. I think what the trip did best was create a desire to do something about what we saw, not for ourselves, but for people halfway across the world. The trip broadened our perspective beyond the golden bubble of Notre Dame and pushed us to start something that will hopefully continue into the years to come. The next project is the Blooming Together children's book. And this was a fabulous book that was written by Amelia Bernier and Trey Carden, and all of the students had input on this. And we asked a recent alum to illustrate it for us. The story is about 4 different seeds from 4 different countries in Africa, the flowers that come from 4 different countries. And they're all blown by a windstorm into South Africa, into a garden. And they don't understand when they blossom why they look so different. Well, a wise old grasshopper, who's pictured there in the lower right-hand corner, named Gabriel, he overhears the conversation and pops down and tells them they're all from different places. And it's the fact that they look so different that makes that garden so beautiful. So this is the beginning of the project, or of the kind of anti-xenophobia campaign for second graders. This book is currently in 5 different second grades, and we're in discussions with 79 other schools to get this book into their curriculum. I will also say we didn't just create the book, we created curriculum around it, and this is where the ACE program came in and helped us so much. So we're giving the schools not just the book, but information about how to set up the book, teach the book, and then what to do afterwards. And of course, if you have a book like this, you also, and here's Amelia actually showing some of the comps, some of the roughs to one of the teachers. And if you have a book like this, you also have to have hand puppets and seed puppets. And actually, this is just from 2 weeks ago. It says, our new term has started with great energy, joy, and new sewing project. Parents without work have the chance to learn to sew and are making finger puppets of seeds, flowers, and other characters in the book Blooming Together. So we're actually giving job training skills to parents without jobs because of this project. The last project, and this is a little dated. This is one of the earlier comps. Is this Welcome to South Africa guide? And after we're finished here today, I invite you to come to the front. That table has the completed Welcome to South Africa guides. We printed 10,000 of those, and we printed 5,000 of the books Blooming Together. So those are up front if you want to come and take a look at them. They're not for you to take home. They're for you to look at here. So this is the Welcome to South Africa guide, which was originally called Refugee Rights Booklet, and when we field tested that, we heard that that was not a good name, so it became Welcome to South Africa. Here's the crew with Sister Natalie at the far left. And again, the title of this talk has to do with collaboration. We would not have been able to do this without all of these partners helping us out, both on and off campus. So here are just a few of them that were involved in this great project. The other thing we did, we submitted this project to an international competition called Ideas That Matter. And we won. We won $50,000. So we were able to produce both the books, the posters, I don't have any posters with me, I apologize, and the Welcome to South Africa guide. This is the website. And this is actually from the College of Arts and Letters. Let me play this for you, shorter than the first one.
More refugees live in South Africa than any other country in the world.
We are hungry, you know, every day we have to go out asking for money or something. Everything is hard, man.
But in the fragile post-apartheid society, plagued by unemployment, refugees are unwelcome.
All they know is to discriminate, discourage other people, make people hopeless.
In 2008, the Jeppestown neighborhood in Johannesburg erupted from tension.
When we heard it on TV that they're beating foreigners, you know, it was unbelievable, you know.
On that day, I saw death.
They beat us up, you know, they took our things. That day, you know, it was a big surprise that it was neighbors, you know, who came to attack us.
This past summer, I came here with the Center for Social Concerns to do research in Johannesburg to better understand how xenophobia impacts this local community. Researchers found that there was a need for media interventions that could harness the power of graphic design as well as other forms of public education to confront the challenge of xenophobia in local communities.
And that's what design does. That's what visual communication does. It can help people understand something more clearly. And whether that's injustice, whether that's how you renew your immigration papers, whether that's if you're being treated poorly in the world of healthcare, whether that's education in the classroom.
Notre Dame design professor Robert Sedlack and his students are working to unite this divided neighborhood and educate refugees about their basic human rights.
The idea of focusing in on the little things helps to affect the larger opinions and the larger atmosphere in Johannesburg.
The Together Plus campaign combines a children's book, healthcare information, a refugee rights book, and the repainting of a graffiti-covered wall in a neighborhood affected by the 2008 attacks.
Go and seek help if...
Together, the projects inform, inspire, and communicate across South Africa's language barriers.
You don't need to understand a language to understand a design.
So we can transform, I guess, atmospheres, environments, walls, like spaces that maybe might have negative connotations or messages, and make them better, make them have a more, or drive them towards another message, another meaning.
We're teaching students that design can change opinions for the better, can inform people, can educate people, and those are the kinds of things that we're doing with our design program, and specifically with classes like this one.
The goal of this campaign is not only to educate, but to bring the community together.
Already, walls of prejudice have been replaced with the African spirit of Ubuntu, togetherness.
Okay, together, class. Together, class. Together.
Yes, I do think if we bring people together, things might change. Yeah. Like people are going to come together, build something together, and just get along.
So we were certainly fortunate to win the $50,000 from the Ideas That Matter grant, and it did allow us to, as I said, print the posters, print the Welcome to South Africa guides, and the books as well. So next steps for this project. That project was introduced in the fall of 2011, and then they worked on it in the spring of 2012. This past spring, I reintroduced the project to my current, to the current class, so spring of 2013. And I realized right away that immersive aspect, getting the students down there, was going to be critical. So we were able to get funding for 11 students to go down. Same kind of hectic schedule. It started out at the Apartheid Museum. We made some great visits to places like the Kliptown Youth Program. Oops. And let me quickly show you one last video. I will also say that with this project, the students identified HIV/AIDS as something that they really wanted to kind of go after. From what I can tell, this is my personal opinion, HIV/AIDS in South Africa is not unlike what it was like in the United States in the early to mid-'80s. It's pretty hush-hush. People don't talk about it. It's as awful as it is anywhere in the world, but it's not being dealt with particularly well. So I'll show this video.
First thing I wanted to do when I found out that I'm positive, I wanted to kill myself. That's true. I wanted to throw myself in the railway.
When I found that I'm HIV positive, at home nobody wanted to accept me.
What we're finding is people are anxious to be tested, don't want to be tested. And how do we get the message across to say, if you're HIV positive, it's not a death sentence. There's treatment out there, you can live a long and healthy life.
Yeah, I would work on that one more.
Professor Robert Sedlack and his students at the University of Notre Dame are responding to this communication challenge by designing resources that empower mothers and children with HIV/AIDS to live positively.
The assumption once someone gets HIV is really misguided, actually, and that's one place that graphic design and visual communication can come into play by sharing the fact that these people can have long and healthy lives if they continue to take their antiretroviral medicines.
So I feel like there's a big misconception about design being a very shallow thing, about it being all about appearance and making things look good. But a big thing about design is that you're solving problems. And before you solve any problem, you need to know the issue. And to know an issue, you obviously have to do research.
It's really a matter of immersion. Even a short immersion is better than no immersion at all. So we need to get down there and talk to the people that we're going to be working with, not for, but with.
Working in conjunction with South African community organizations, Professor Sedlack and his class traveled to Johannesburg to gain first-hand perspective on the problems they hope to solve.
I never imagined that was something within the scope of a university to do, to send me to South Africa to meet the people that I was trying to reach with my design projects and get to really understand on a personal level what the need is in this country and what I can actually do to make change.
Informed by the research in South Africa, the students created a wide range of design solutions, including an online support committee for young women and HIV-related educational materials for children.
One of my favorite definitions of design is taking an existing situation and turning it into a preferred situation. And that's really what we're trying to do with our design program. The social model of design that we're teaching students and that they're practicing is using design
to inform people, to educate people, to help change opinions, to help people grow and learn and live better lives. And that's how we at the University of Notre Dame see design.
So these projects are still somewhat in their infancy. One of the students, Robert Hamilton, who's in the back row there in the blue shirt, is actually in South Africa. He graduated in the spring, and in early August he went to South Africa and will be down there through December working to move all these projects forward. So that we're very lucky about that. All the work I'm telling you about is going on primarily in Johannesburg and South Africa, but these issues are international issues. I mean, there are problems with xenophobia in most every country. There are problems with xenophobia in the United States. So we also think that, you know, these are kind of replicable projects that we can do across a lot of different countries. With that, I'd like to do something a little unusual. I'd like to invite some students to come up here and sit on the edge of the stage now, and if the house lights could come up, I would appreciate it. These are the students, and they're really the ones you need to see because I was the teacher. They actually created the work. So students, please come up and join. Some of these students are still in school and working on projects. Others have graduated and have gone on to different jobs. And if you, Amelia, want to start, actually, can you grab that microphone right in front of you? It should be live. If you want to just introduce yourself, if you're graduated, tell us when you graduated, and if you're working, where you're working really quickly. And then I will open the floor to questions for either me or the students.
Hello. Hi, I'm Amelia Bernier. I was the one that said that I talk a lot, so I'll keep this brief. I graduated in 2012, and I currently live in Chicago, and I work at Punch Kick Interactive.
Hello, my name is Allie Torville. I was also in 2012. We were one of the first class to go. It's a great project. And I am also in Chicago, and I work for Ogilvy.
My name is Brandon Keelan. I graduated in 2013, just in May, and I'm currently working in Chicago at a creative agency called 50,000 Feet.
Hello, I'm Amanda Carter. I graduated in 2012, and I am currently living in Seattle and working at Precept Wine.
Hi, my name is Maria Massa. I'm a senior here, and I'm actually continuing the project that Sarah and myself started working on in South Africa in the spring.
Hi, I'm Sarah Colettis. I graduated this past May, and I'm currently in New York working in marketing.
Hi, I'm Steph Walls. I'm a current senior, and yeah, was in South Africa with everyone this past spring break.
My name is Trey Carden. I'm a BFA candidate in the class of 2014.
Hi, I'm Dan Azek. This is weird. I graduated last year, and I work in San Francisco right now for one of the guys you talked about in the beginning, but yeah.
I'm James Slavin. I'm a senior this year. I worked on the past project, the 2013 one.
With that, I'd like to open it up to questions. Are there any? Yes, please.
Have you run across the program? Yale did a program based upon dance, where they sent a whole group over and
I've heard about it. I do not. I have to admit, I do not know it well. Okay. Yeah. And that was a successful program.
Similar type.
Yeah. Yes.
I wondered, of the group of students up there, how many of you see yourselves doing socially responsible things for the next 5, 10 years? Give us an idea where that might go, any one or two of them.
So it's an interesting question in a lot of ways because as recent graduates, most of us took probably the first job that was offered to us.
No.
Okay. So as socially change kind of, it's a hard field to break into as a recent graduate. But a lot of times there are opportunities within your field or your career to do either projects outside of the scope of your working hours from 9 to 5, or to kind of convince
your employer to take on those kinds of projects. They're really beneficial in a lot of ways to both yourself and to your employer as an organization to kind of benefit the betterment of humanity. So, I don't know.
Other questions? Yeah, please. The question, your approach is, I say, grassroots approach. You're dealing with people affected, but it would appear from what's presented that a lot of the issues might be at the higher level, in Pretoria, at the government level, and that in terms of communications, in terms of design, what support, if any, have you received at the higher level to get more mass marketing, mass design information out, so you can do that could take you a long road.
Sure. So in terms of governmental support, we're not likely to get it, if that makes any sense. South African government is kind of opposed to refugees coming into their country at the moment. There are a lot of economic issues underlying public opinion about that, so we're not likely to get that kind of support. We have been working closely with some partners on the ground as in terms of like a nonprofit and private sector benefits to the community. We've been working closely with Jesuit Refugee Services, which is an operating branch of the UN. So they're in South Africa working with refugee populations in Johannesburg, Cape Town, many of the major cities. And they actually distributed this book, this Welcome to South Africa guide. So in terms of kind of reaching populations, we're doing grassroots through like the networks that already exist. We're not trying to develop our own because that really wouldn't work. As students from a university on a different continent, it'd be challenging to kind of build our network. So we're kind of tapping into existing networks within the community to distribute materials. So, does that answer your question?
It's amazing to see you guys linking up with things like the Center for Social Concerns. Are they now going back to the design department, visual communications, to work on more projects with them in the future?
Yeah, actually, they've reached out to our programs, our design program specifically, and have come up with kind of links that both include finances, but also different kinds of kind of knowledge-based support throughout, in the past several years, actually. So the CSC has been a great benefit to our design program. Yeah. Please.
How are you measuring the outcomes of what you're doing? I mean, because we hear sort of the beginning of the project, and what are the endpoints, and how are you measuring that?
Right. That's a great question. And to date, we're unable to measure it because these things are just launching right now. But we're talking. Who's over Brandon? I'm totally forgetting who we're talking to.
Well, I mean, we've been working with. So we're working with. So the
Brandon spent the summer. So he's a lot.
Yeah, I spent the summer after my junior year, so right after the spring semester when we kind of finished these projects, doing all of the like logistical coordination of how this project might be printed, produced, and sent out. So in terms of details, that was probably me. For different projects, we're working with different organizations. So for the children's book, we're working with the Catholic Schools organization throughout the country that operates 300 different Catholic schools. And they're our primary test launch of the children's book to see if there's like a measurement for the understanding of children at a young age and how much they're retaining of the information that is provided within the book and whether or not there's any perception shift. Robert mentioned briefly that there is like a curriculum built around this book. And that curriculum includes kind of pre and post testing that the Catholic organization, the ACE, has helped us with. They kind of developed a test sort of at that age for what you can kind of analyze as information. In terms of the refugee rights booklet, a lot of the measurement there is just how much we've distributed. The refugee population as a group is mostly migrant, obviously, and it's hard to measure any specific data about that, but you can measure how much information has been either received by a person and whether or not there's been any follow-up. So there are a lot of, in the materials, kind of like organizations they can call and phone, and we've been kind of trying to coordinate to see if they can ask the question, like, where did you find us? How did you learn about us, to see whether or not this material is being used or reached by people. So those are how we're measuring at the moment.
We hope xenophobia just disappears.
That would be wonderful.
Other questions? All right. students, I'll ask you to go back to your seats. I have just one more quick thing. After I finish up here, I just need about 3 more minutes, and we'll be right about an hour here. If the lights would come back down for a minute, I would appreciate it. Please, if you'd like to come up and check out the children's book, Blooming Together, or the Refugee Rights, the Welcome to South Africa Guide, please feel free to come up afterwards. I want to talk about, just for a few minutes to lighten the mood a little bit, the reason we're all here today. My father and mother are both in the audience today, and my father's a double donor, graduating in '59 as an undergrad, and then he went to some school in Boston, I think Harvard. I hear it's a good school, but it's not Notre Dame. And then he came back and got his PhD here in 1965. And so I was pretty much dipped in the water, the holy water that is Notre Dame football from an early age, as you can imagine. In fact, when I was a child, and it wasn't even football season, we would ask my dad what time it was. And he would say, 8 o'clock and all is well. Southern Cal, go to hell. This is the oversized cookie that my sister brought to Thanksgiving weekend last year when we played USC at USC. I think my dislike for USC probably occurred in the late 70s and early 80s when my dad brought me up to a couple of games back to back. These are the tickets to those games, 1979 and 1981. Yes, I still have the tickets. A little bit of a pack rat. $11 and $13, by the way. I'm sure when they went up to $13, my dad was incensed at the price hike. In both of these games, we got to see a Heisman Trophy winner. Unfortunately, neither of them played for Notre Dame. We saw Charles White run all over Notre Dame, and then we saw Marcus Allen run all over Notre Dame. So I think my dislike for USC began at that point. My mother, also in the audience, even though my dad's an alum, kind of has my dad trumped. She was coming to South Bend in the 40s to go to Notre Dame games. It's hard to see. The picture on the left is from 1944. What she and her sister are holding in their hands are little crocheted footballs. And of course, the picture on the right is my mother 2 years later, 1946, at the Grotto, and I presume she's praying for a victory over USC. Those of you who know this was taken at the College Football Hall of Fame. If you know anything about this rivalry, you'll know why 2005 was vacated. And you got, and you have to end a presentation with a picture of a couple of cute kids. These are my children, Emma and Trey. And I purposely show this picture. They are 12, and actually Trey turned 10 yesterday. But this is about 5 years ago. When this picture was taken. I show this one because it was at about the same time. Trey had a buddy over at our house, and they were talking about things, and I was kind of not really eavesdropping, but I could hear what the kids were talking about. And his buddy said, "I hate broccoli," and Trey looked at him, and his mouth kind of opened up, and he said, "In our house, we're not allowed to use the word hate unless we're talking about USC." So that's my way of saying go Irish and beat USC. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Shows you why we're proud of the design program at Notre Dame, why we're proud to be working at a university that supports a program like this, and why especially we're proud to work as colleagues of Robert Sedlack.